everybody. Today's lesson is going to be going over verb moods. So far we have talked about parts of speech and what a verb is. We know that a verb is an action or a state of being. The state of being verbs, of course, are verbs like am, is, are, was, were, will be. And of course, actions are things that we do: talking, speaking, jumping, writing, listening, washing, drying. I'm doing laundry right now while I'm recording this. That's why I have washing and drying in my mind. So these are just actions that we do. So we know that verbs are actions. We know that verbals are words that look like a verb, but they don't act like a verb, meaning they're not the action of a sentence. They act like nouns if they're infinitive verbals or gerund verbals, or they can act like adjectives if they're participle verbals. So we know that verbs can act in a lot of different ways. So now we're finally to the part where we're going to talk about verb moods. And I think this is probably one of the more important grammar lessons for you, especially if you're someone who writes, and all of you do because you write for me, or if you're someone who wants to go into some sort of a job that you need communication for, which is most jobs, by the way, regardless of technology. All right, so we're going to be talking about verb moods today. We're going to be able to define them. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to define what a verb mood is and the different verb moods, and correctly use the 5 verb moods, which are the indicative, imperative, interrogative, conditional, and subjunctive moods. Now, some of these words might look familiar to you, especially things like interrogative and imperative, because you'll probably remember those as types of sentences that you learned maybe way back in 5th and 6th grade. All right, so let's dive in. You want to make sure that you have your guided notes either open and your screen is split so that you're watching this presentation and taking notes at the same time, or that you have printed out your guided notes and you have them in front of you with a pen or a pencil. If you haven't, go ahead and pause this video now and get that started. Okay, so let's begin. What is mood anyway? I like our little image over here: tense, moody, irregular. You must be a verb, which probably will make much more sense to you by the end of this lesson. Okay, so what do we mean when we're talking about mood anyway, right? Well, in real life, we know that, you could be in a good mood, you can be in a bad mood, you can be in a funny mood. We know that it's kind of like an expression almost. We know that in literature, I ask you for the mood of the book, and you guys will give me words like gloomy or optimistic or hopeful or happy or joyful. And so you're talking about like the mood of a scene or the mood of a book, right? When you have Jaws, let's take Jaws, for example, and all of a sudden you hear that music, dun dun dun. What's the mood there? Suspenseful, right? So you're talking about mood there. Well, in grammar, the mood of a sentence is its verbs. Okay, and it's telling you, the verbs are giving you more information that is helping you to understand what the speaker means. So we have 5 of them. We have the indicative mood, we have the imperative mood, the interrogative mood, conditional, and subjunctive. And I'm here to tell you all right now that you have used all 5 of these probably in one day. Okay, so it's just a matter of learning what they are so that you can then use them appropriately in your own writing, in your own speech, to get your point across better and be a more effective communicator. Okay, so let's begin with the indicative and the interrogative moods. These are the 2 that I told you probably sound the most familiar to you. And the indicative and the interrogative moods are used when you are giving factual statements, including questions, because a question can still be a factual statement, or opinions that are actually facts. So I put in parentheses here, these are like declarative and interrogative sentences. Remember, declarative sentences end in a period, and interrogative sentences end in a question mark. Okay, so that's going way back to 6th grade. All right, can be any verb tense. So we can put the indicative or interrogative moods in the past, the present, the future. We can use it in the past conditional, or any of the continuous tenses. That's the ones that end in ing. We also call them progressive tenses. All right, so they can be used in any tense. So let's take a look at some examples. I saw something annoying today. That is an indicative statement, a declarative statement. So it's in the indicative mood. Okay, you're just indicating, telling about something. All right. The lawyers have not said if they will appeal the decision. Again, that is, look at, it's in a perfect tense because it has the helping verb have in it. All right. And it's just indicating a fact. So we call that the indicative mood. Purple is the new black. Well, that's an opinion, but they're saying it like a statement. They're declaring it. So we say that that is indicative. And look at that. That's in the present tense. Purple is. The verb is in the present tense, but it's still just telling you something, right? Dr. Seuss is one of the best-selling poets of all time. Okay, that is a fact. So we look at it and we say, okay, that's a fact. It's a declarative sentence, but look at the tense that it's written in. It's in the present tense. It's just indicating something. So the mood of that sentence is that it's just telling you something. You're not trying to convince anyone of anything. You're not trying to talk about some imaginary circumstance here. You're just saying and indicating a fact. Okay. Now we have the imperative mood. This is another one of the the words that you might remember. Imperatives are commands, they're demands, they're instructions. They are not questions. They are requests. There's something that they want you to do. Your parents, your teachers probably speak to you in the imperative mood quite often. Okay. Here's what's important about this, and I know a lot of you will remember it, but just in case you don't, when you write something in the imperative mood, there's no subject, not usually, okay? It's usually because that subject is implied. When I tell you, watch this video, take your notes, I'm not saying, you watch this video, you take the notes. I am eliminating that you because it's implied that I'm talking to you. So I don't need to say it over again. Sometimes people will add in the you because they want to emphasize who they're talking about or emphasize their point. So like, look at some of these memes that I have around. Get to the chopper, right? That get to, that's your verb, and you're talking to someone, but you're not saying who. It's just implied that it's the person in front of you. You shall not pass, right? From Lord of the Rings. So obviously here they decided to put in the subject of the sentence for emphasis. All right. It is still a complete sentence, even though the subject is implied and not written there, and that's because you know that who the person is talking to. Okay, so it's not a fragment. Let's take a look at some examples. Come in, please. So it's a demand, it's an instruction, it's a request, it's a command, but you can still be polite about it, right? So come in, please. So again, we don't have our subject there. Don't touch that. Again, no subject. Shut the door. Turn on the computer, please. And let's go to the library. So you can see none of these have a subject, which imperative mood usually doesn't. And the reason why this sentence is in an imperative mood is because you can tell just by how it's written that it is giving someone a demand, requesting something, or giving instruction. So it's imperative means important. So it's almost like you use this mood, this type of sentence, when you want to get across something that's really important. So it's almost like we've eliminated the subject to try and make it in as few words as possible, so there's not as much processing going on, because that's how important it is. So when you want to say something to someone, like let's say you're sitting there doing your homework on your Chromebook and you get up to go stretch your legs for a minute, and someone comes by and they almost tip over your water cup onto your Chromebook. Well, that would be the end of your Chromebook, right? So what do? Do you calmly sit there and say, oh, will you please be careful because my water cup is right there and you're about to spill it and it could ruin my Chromebook? And no, you don't. You say, watch out, or hey, you get their attention in as little words as possible because it's imperative, it's important that you get their attention right away and you get your point across right away. So the imperative mood is used when you are giving demands, instructions, requests, commands, and you are eliminating that subject because you're trying to get your point across, usually in as little words as possible. So let's make sure our notes are still filled in. If you need to pause at this point, that's completely fine. Pause the video and continue taking your notes. Make sure everything's filled in. If there's something that you don't understand, please highlight it either on the doc itself or use a highlighter if you've printed it out so that you can ask me towards the end of the lesson. All right. let's see here. All right, so let's keep going here with our conditional and our subjunctive moods. These are probably the trickiest because they are very, very similar. I am going to try and pull on some of your Spanish knowledge because at this point you are in Spanish. Some of you might be native Spanish speakers, and you might not know that you use the conditional and subjunctive moods in Spanish all the time, but we don't use them too often in English because they are about very specific. The mood is used during very specific times. So let's talk about them. Okay, the conditional mood. Sorry, it talks about what would happen or what one would do in certain circumstances. So this is a mood that's talking about something that could happen. It hasn't. It is a hypothetical, but it technically could happen. So let's look at our first example here. I would only eat chocolate grasshoppers if I were starving. So you have your conditional verbs here, would and were. And those indicate that, number one, you haven't eaten grasshoppers, but it also indicates to your speaker that the only way you ever would is if you were absolutely starving. So it's not necessarily something that has happened. It's not a circumstance that's come to be, but it could. It could. If you were starving, you might actually eat a chocolate-covered grasshopper. I've eaten chocolate-covered crickets before. It wasn't so bad. So, I wasn't starving, though. I just, it was an opportunity. But here you go. That's what I want you guys to think about. I want you to think about the fact that these conditions, you're technically putting a condition on when you would do something. Okay, you're putting a condition on it. In Spanish, you use the ending I with a accent mark over IA at the end of a verb. So, like, for example, if you wanted to ask someone, would you do me a favor? You would say, ¿me harías un favor? Okay, so it's kind of almost like in Spanish, you use it as more like a polite way of saying things. Or like if you're ordering something, instead of saying like dame, which is give me, you could say yo quería un café. I would like a coffee, right? So it would be a lot more polite. But in English, we really use it more to talk about giving a condition to a circumstance. For something to happen, something else has to exist. So let's look at our second example. I would climb Mount Kilimanjaro. So you're saying I would do something, but here's the condition: for $1 million, right? Let's look at our third example. It might work. So you're saying here's a condition, or here's a circumstance. Something could happen, but here's the condition. For it to work, we could all get to go. Okay, so there has to be some sort of a condition there. Now let's talk about the subjunctive, because subjunctive can often be confused with conditional. The subjunctive mood talks about a situation that is completely uncertain. It is unreal. It is hypothetical, or it's just a wish. The most common one I've ever heard is if I had $1 million, or if I were rich, I would, travel the world, something like that, right? So it's an uncertain or maybe even unreal. It's a hypothetical. Hypothetical means that you're just talking about something that hasn't happened but maybe could, or it's just a wish. Let's look at our first example. If I were you, I wouldn't eat that. Now, I've seen this a lot, okay? This is obviously unreal. You can't be the other person. So you don't say if I was you. You say if I were you. That were is always used in the subjunctive. Remember, that is one of our state of being verbs, okay? So if I wish I were taller. Yeah, well, this is unreal, or it's just a wish. I mean, when you have key words there like I wish, I hope, I dream, things that indicate some sort of unreal situation, then you're definitely about to use the subjunctive mood. We would go to the pool if it were summer. We would go to the pool if it were summer. Now, here's where you might get confused and think that sounds an awful lot like the conditional mood, because it's using would and then it's giving a condition. Well, the fact that we call this subjunctive is because this is unreal or hypothetical You can even consider it a wish. It's not summer. Well, it is for us because we're always in summer in Southern California. But let's say that this were being said in January. We would go to the pool if it were summer. Okay. So it is a hypothetical or unreal situation, or it could also be considered a wish. All right, so go ahead and fill in your notes. Make sure that you have an understanding, a basic understanding, and then come back to this. All right, let's go over some practice here. I can't remember if these are on your notes or not. If they're not, go ahead and grab a separate sheet of paper. And what I'd like for you guys to do is to label each sentence. I want you to tell me what mood it's in. So for numbers 1 through 5, you do have 5 different moods. I want you to try, and you can use your notes. You can go back in this video, but I would like you to please label them in one of the moods. So go ahead and pause the video and do that now. All right, let's see how you did. Go to your room. That is in the imperative tense. The subject of you is implied. Are you sure about that? Well, that's a question, so we know that that's in the interrogative mood. If you finish your homework, oh, look, I feel like a condition is coming on. You can go play. So it's giving you the option of playing, but the condition is that you have to do your homework, so we call that the conditional mood. If I were president, I would banish all taxes. Well, if you're in my U.S. History 2 class, you know that that probably wouldn't work out, right? But if I were president, are you president? No. Is that an unreal situation? Yes. Is it a hypothetical situation? Yes. Is it a wish? Yes. It's all of those things. So if I were president, I would banish all taxes is the subjunctive mood. He wants $1 million. Well, that's just a fact. Okay. I don't know very many people who would turn their nose up at $1 million. It's a fact. It's written in the present tense. It's giving you a bit of information. It's indicating information. So we call that the indicative mood. All right, for this one, I would like you guys to choose the correct verb. This is where it gets a little bit trickier. So I want you to read it both ways. And I want you to ask yourself what mood it's in, number one. And if it's in a certain mood, then what verb will go with it? So go ahead and pause this video now and do this. Okay, so let's see how you guys did. Number one, if I were famous, I would still help charities. Okay, this is subjunctive mood because you're not famous yet. It's a hypothetical, but you are saying something you would do. So because it's the subjunctive mood, you're going to use were, not was. Go upstairs and fold the laundry. Well, that's an imperative sentence. You're telling someone to do something. In fact, you know that because the subject is not written there. It is implied. Are you going to help me? This is the interrogative mood. Now, what is important for you guys to remember, from way back when and from all your writing and reading, is that when you write a question, the verb and the subject are switched around. So usually sentences are SVU, right? They have their subject, the verb, and then their objects. But when it's an interrogative or a question type of sentence, you're going to have verb, subject, object. So VISO, right? So that is one thing you should always be aware of when you're writing sentences, that the verb should come first, followed by the subject. He is attending his cousin's wedding. He is the correct way because, of course, this is just indicating something, which means it's in the indicative mood. It's just telling you that he's going to attend his cousin's wedding. If I said he would attend his cousin's wedding, there would be something missing. You would need to give the condition in which he would attend. So that wouldn't make sense. This is just the indicative mood, so it's he is. If Cinderella, okay, so the word if, at this point you guys should be seeing, is going to either be conditional or subjunctive. So you need to see which mood it would be in. If Cinderella finishes her chores, she might get to go to the ball. This is definitely conditional because it's giving you a condition in which she would be able to go to the ball. So if she finishes her chores, that's the condition. She might get to go to the ball. Okay, she might, not she will, she might. All right, you guys, that is it for verb mood. Hopefully you understand. We'll do a little bit more practice with this. In the meantime, watch this video as many times as you need and make sure those notes are filled out completely so that you can turn them into Google Classroom.